So, hello everybody. Welcome to Finding the Next Gear. I've got Matt Tanner, founder of Same Page. Matt, thanks for joining the show.
Excited, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dig in here. So tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do. How long have you been an entrepreneur? Let's start there.
I don't even, it's hard to even think of myself as that, but I guess I technically am. So officially, the date would be April 1st of 2020. We can get into why that's the date, but I was kind of pushed into this thing. So about a year and a half.
Nice, nice. And so what do you actually do at Same Page?
All right, so same page. If I'm at like a dinner party and I don't really want to talk to anybody, I just say we're an HR consulting, and that usually people just kind of walk away because no one wants to hear about that. But for those that are in the know, we are fractional HR, so we provide HR for businesses that don't yet have an HR department. That's like the very simple way to put it. So.
No, I think you brought the sexy back to HR. I like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, that's the goal. We do like to say that it's approachable HR because a lot of people are kind of scared by that, and we try to bring like a human element, even though the word human is in HR. A lot of people forget that, so that's how we try to do it.
Nice. Now, so as HR is kind of, you mentioned April 21st as a date. We'll talk about that in a second, but have you always been passionate about the HR space? Like, how'd you get into this?
Yeah, I was talking about this with somebody recently, and I don't think anybody when they're like in kindergarten is like, I want to grow up and get into HR. I don't know that I like had a passion for that at any time. I kind of fell into it, but I am passionate about parts of it, and I think that's important. Way back when I was a consultant, Six Sigma, black belt, process improvement consulting,
Yeah.
and I got to do a little bit of training in that, and I really scratched the niche of like, oh, I like this learning development piece. Maybe I'll be a trainer, and I went back to school and got this degree in HR with this vision of being uh, doing some training, and then as soon as I finished that degree, some good friends of mine were starting a business here in Atlanta called King of Pops, and
Mhm.
I reached out to them and said, "Hey, do you need some HR help?" And they were like, "We have two employees and we're brothers, so we don't need any HR help, but you can work here." And so I joined them and started off doing like just all kinds of random things. But eventually, over 7 years, we grew that to a couple hundred employees, and I got to run
Nice.
HR for that company. And that's when it really hit like, oh, there's a lot of pieces to what we think of as HR. It's really about building cultures and it's the people stuff. I mean, even these days, a lot of people just call it people operations.
Sure.
So yeah, I'm passionate about just getting into the nuts and bolts of a business and people strategy and things like that. So that's how I kind of stumbled into it
Sure. There's a lot of
over
nuances
time.
in HR. It's a hell of a lot more complex, and
Yeah,
frankly, it's something one of those areas which I personally don't want to touch, right? And so
yeah,
you mentioned fractional and what you guys do. And I want to dig into that just a second ago, but it makes a lot of sense to me in companies that are kind of my size, but even
mhm.
larger. Upwards of probably 25, 30 million. I imagine would be a target market. But for the people listening, what the heck is fractional HR? I mean, what do you guys actually provide?
Yeah,
You do?
we actually, my business partner and I, we kind of debate. Well, we discuss if we should even use that term. So she may be slapping me on the wrist. But like originally, when I think of fractional HR, or you may be more familiar with like a fractional controller, it's somebody that comes in and serves as the head of HR on a fractional basis. Maybe they do that for 5 or 6 companies, and so the benefit to the company is they pay less than a full-time person, but they get a full-time person's experience. They just don't get them all the time. And so it's kind of like you see this with marketing and a lot of other things. And so when I started my business, I was really just a consultant. I really didn't have a business. It was just me spread out amongst 3 or 4 companies. And so I kind of use that term interchangeably with what we do now. Although in reality, what we do now is we're placing, it's still, I guess, on a fractional basis, but we're placing what we call a people person with a business, kind of like an HR generalist, and they would handle a handful of clients. So that's what I think of when I think of fractional, just somebody that's dedicated to a handful of businesses. So they get the variety, and then the business gets the benefit of somebody with a lot of experience that is willing to work on kind of a part-time basis for multiple people.
Yeah. So essentially, is it all about kind of providing access to talent that maybe these companies wouldn't have
Yeah,
the ability to attract, reach, or otherwise have access to?
That's a big part of it. One of our selling points is like, hey, you're going to get somebody with a lot of experience that we don't frame it exactly this way, but they probably couldn't afford to hire because this person's got
Oh,
like
don't be bashful about it. That's my business. It's generally
yeah,
typically couldn't afford this person, annually. So let's give them to you on a fractional basis.
yeah, and we think at your size, you probably don't need a person annually. Like they can handle it in a fraction of a week, and so that makes sense. It's also just easier, as you know, like hiring, and then if it doesn't work out, exiting. Like that's expensive, time-consuming stuff. So we're pretty turnkey for onboarding, and then if when you're done, you can, if you wanted to get out, you can get out pretty easily. So there's a lot of benefits to going that route instead of the old. I mean, this is your world. Like post a
Right.
job, find a head of HR. Like that's a hard thing to do, and if you get it wrong, what an expensive mistake. So a lot of people like that benefit of it too. They're like, oh, y'all have great experience. Let's try it, see how it works.
Do you
So
do
that's
you
another
handle the
benefit.
entirety of the HR function from hiring, firing to onboarding, exit interviews, as well as maybe like workers' comp if that comes up?
Pretty much everything except the act of actually recruiting, because that's such a specific niche thing that's also very time consuming. And there's a lot of folks that are really, really good at it. It's not our expertise. So we like to say from the moment someone is hired until they leave the company, that's what we'll handle. And we've got like all over our website, all kinds of specific bullet points of the things we do. But that's the simplest way to put it. Like we don't recruit. We
Sure.
learned that the hard way. We tried that a little bit
Yeah.
early on, and there's a
I'm
reason
I'm the
that.
inverse. We do the recruiting component, but the
Yeah,
HR to me is a nightmare and something I want to kind of, stay away from at all costs.
yeah, which is why
Um,
we gotta work together on some of these. But yeah, that's
yeah.
that's the one thing we don't do.
Yeah. So what's your sweet spot? I mean, are you guys industry agnostic? Do you have a focus on employee size? Like really what kind of was your target? What is a perfect customer for you?
Yeah, perfect customer. It's usually like 200 employees or less. That even maybe on the high end, but like 200 or less employees, and the business is growing. And this is sometimes harder to find, but that they actually care about the people and the culture. It's not just like, hey, we got to have HR.
Right.
So we look at. We're pretty much industry agnostic. We have a roster of super talented folks that have different expertise. So if we're chatting with a tech company, we'll find someone that's got experience in that field. If we're chatting with an industrial company, we may look at a different people person for that. So pretty much industry agnostic. Um, Under 200 employees, because when you get up that size, you probably then do need
Right. It's about
a
time.
full-time person,
Yeah.
and so that's important. That's a big thing for us.
Okay. It's funny you mentioned we want to work with companies that actually care about their people. And now it's like every single company, touts that they really do care.
Yeah,
And I don't know what the stat is, but I would say by and large, majority actually do not. It's all about the
right.
profitability, the revenue, and that's generally, off the backs of the personnel.
Yeah, and for HR, I can sniff this out pretty early. If somebody reaches out to us and they're just looking for compliance, they say things like, I just don't want to go to jail. And that's a part of what we provide. It's like there's a
Right.
lot of this HR stuff you got to do that we can help you with. But if that's the only thing you care about, there are just far cheaper solutions out there. There's
Right.
software, there's companies that I
There's
think are really,
attorneys.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's you can go do like a PEO. We can talk about how we differ from that. But yeah, if that's all you're looking for, that's not a great fit for us. And I think we've differentiated ourselves pretty well. If you go out and Google like HR consultants, a lot of the websites, first of all, they're really dated and look really bad, but they're just plastered with things like don't use Google for your HR rules. Like we'll keep you out of jail. It's very scare tactic stuff.
Right.
Um, and I guess that probably works to a degree, but that's not our main focus. Like we'll keep you out of trouble, but we want to do
Yeah.
things like what is your growth strategy for the next couple of years? Like what's your performance management process?
Right.
So we try to go beyond the just keeping you out of jail. That's like table stakes, I think.
You guys are the boutique offering, the strategic partner as it pertains to your HR needs, right?
Yeah, for
May want
sure.
to write that one down.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one because there's cheaper options. I mean, out there,
Yeah.
there's different ways to do it, and so sometimes we kind of direct people to that if we're not a
Right.
good fit.
Well, the same way, I think part of being an entrepreneur is knowing who's a good client and who's not. And I have the same discussions where, I no longer negotiate on price. And if somebody, the first thing they want to talk about is price and T's and C's and all this jazz, then generally they're not the right partner because I want to talk about, what are we trying to, what's the end goal?
Yeah,
And if that's what we really care about, then the pricing discussion and the deliverable, it's
yeah,
a different dialogue.
There's a software out there. I won't name it because I guess it's technically a competitor, but they advertise like you get a dedicated HR person for $99 a month. And I had somebody ask me recently, like, why would I? I mean, we are quite a bit more than that.
Yeah.
And I had somebody ask me, like, why wouldn't I just go with this thing? And I said, please go with that and let me know. I mean, it's like I'd love to know what you get for $99 a month. And we actually went through the process of kind of pretending that we were interested in that business to find out how they work. And their dedicated HR person has like 100 clients. I don't think you could actually be dedicated to 100 clients. So that's how that model works. And I guess that works for them. I'm not disparaging it. I'm sure it's very successful, but just a different thing.
Different mindset, different customer base as well, right?
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
so what do you actually do for the company? Are you still providing HR services yourself? Are you more so kind of an overlay and managing strategic vision,
Yeah.
direction, and just there to kind of remove obstacles for your HR folks?
Yeah, it's a great question that I'm sure you probably dig into with all your guests on this because like when I started, I'm trying to. I mean, you know the adage like work on the business, not in the
Right.
business. I'm trying to do
Like,
more of that.
like Kawasaki, right?
Yeah, yeah. I never knew who to attribute that to. Yeah, so I'm trying to do more of that. I've a big breakthrough was bringing on a business partner, someone I've known for a long time, and we really are currently splitting the work up into. I handle most of the operations, and she handles most of the sales and marketing.
Right.
And so, at our size, yes, I am still um, somewhat customer facing on HR issues. Like we've got dedicated, we call them a people person that we place. But if they need to escalate something or if they're not sure, that generally comes to me. And I think somewhere down the road, we'll have somebody else filling that role. But for now, yeah, I am still doing a mix of working on the business and in the business. So, and I like that, but we'll see how that changes. It's definitely less, like I said, than when I started,
Right.
when I was walking around calling myself an entrepreneur, saying I had a business, and really I just
Felt like a glorified consultant, right?
I created like an 80-hour a week job for myself, which was fine, but it wasn't a business. It was just me completely
Yeah.
customer facing at all times. So,
I think that's part of
um,
the rite of passage, though, as an entrepreneur. I
yeah,
did the same thing. I'm 4.5 years, 4.8 years to be precise, through this
yeah,
journey. I'm still working in the business and trying to pry myself out of it to work more on it. And yeah, I've kind of come to the realization that I think it's just going to be a hybrid role
mhm,
indefinitely. You can't, the second you get too far removed from your clients, things fall through the cracks. But if you're too involved, then you're not going to be able to have kind of a vision and an eye on what's next and continue to grow your actual business. So it's a tough mix for sure.
yeah, no doubt.
So how did you determine like the need for the service, right? I mean, you mentioned, I think the date was April 21st, 2020. We'll get there in one moment. But
April
how did you determine
1st.
there was a
Yeah,
need?
yeah.
Was this a hunch, right? Like, how did product market fit actually work?
Uh, no, I'm not that smart. It was so I was a COVID layoff. When I left King of Pops, I went to Mailchimp, a company called Mailchimp. I worked there for a couple of years. Loved it, great company. Now acquired by Intuit for like $1 billion. Um, and I left Mailchimp in January of 2020. If you think back to what was going on then, joined a company called Full Story, which I loved, and COVID hit, and they kind of freaked out and had a massive layoff. I was one of the newer folks in, one of the first ones out.
First in, first out. Yep.
First, they then were a client for a period of time for me, so that actually worked out great. And but when I left that company in April, I just kind of, I mean, it's the height of the pandemic. The whole world's freaking out. I don't know what's going on. I just took a couple of weeks, and then I just started emailing everybody I've ever worked with, like, hey, do you need some help? Like,
Yep.
I thought in the back of my mind maybe I'd do my own thing, but I was thinking like 10 or 20 years down the road. I was very much a company man, like, comfortable in that W-2 world. Um, and so I just started emailing folks that I'd worked with, and I think people just kind of, I had a few opportunities to do some stuff for MailChimp, for a couple of past employers, and then Full Story called me and said, hey, I have this, my old boss at Full Story was like, I have this friend that has a small business, and I just pitched to him as if I had this actual business, and he's like, let's do it. And so then within a couple of weeks, I was like, crap, I guess I'm doing this. So I was very much pushed into it. There was no like one page strategic plan yet, no product market fit. It was just like, hey, do you need HR help? I think I can do that for you. And that was great. He referred me to another, and it kind of snowballed from there. And then I had to take a break and be like, whoa, I actually took on one too many clients.
Sure.
and my work started suffering, and I had to fire that client before they fired me. So I realized then, like, wow, this is like not hard to. I realized I was kind of over promising what I could
Sure.
deliver. But the encouraging part was like, wow, there must be a market fit here because everybody I talk to is interested. So I
Yeah.
either need to charge more or do something differently. But that was the extent of the research. So, and we're continuing to hone it, and I've had
Yeah.
multiple pivots. Pretty happy with where we are now. But yeah, it was very much by the seat of my pants.
Yes, it's totally organic. It's funny. I've had a couple of conversations with other founders where same thing. They were laid off, they left, whatever the impetus was, they were out and they basically just started consulting. And they're
Yep.
like, okay, so this is, this is going well. And it's funny how good work can parlay itself into more opportunity. And so they did a good job here. They
Yeah.
also were introduced, they referred into another client. So they started thinking, there actually is a business model here, and then they hired somebody, and then naturally, the business kind of expanded from there. And it sounds like you're on the same path, which is great.
Yeah, I give a lot of credit. So, my boss at Full Story, who worked for Laszlo Bach at Google, who's like the only is the kind of book only like person I know that's actually kind of famous in HR. That's why I went to Full Story. When I think she felt so bad, right? I mean, when she laid me off, I know she felt really bad about it, and she called me a couple weeks later about this friend of hers that had this small business in Atlanta, and that was really the push. Like I was interviewing at the time for another job. Like if I had not gotten that one first client, that like monthly rate, he's like, "Do you have a W-9?" I'm like, "Let me go form an LLC today." Like that,
Hold on a second. I
yeah,
got
that kind of
oh,
stuff. Like
W9.
I spent the $125 or whatever to start an LLC. I was like, "Holy crap, I think I'm doing this," and then got that first check from him, and I'm like, "Wow, I think I." That made it real to me.
Yeah.
I'm a little, maybe it was imposter syndrome, maybe it's risk averse, but that was the push I needed to be like, let me go make a website this weekend and like
Yep.
have an actual business. And so things from there, it just takes one, and then you kind of feel like, wow, this might be real. And then, like you said,
Totally agree.
referred to others. So I give her, even though she laid me off, a lot of credit for shoving me into this, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. So the defining moment for you was really that first paycheck and the conversation where it's like, hey, I'm actually going to kind of close an opportunity here and begin working for somebody, working with
Yeah.
somebody.
And then, walked into his building first day, just uh, terrified, like, what have I just agreed to do? Like, I'm used to just going into work and having a boss. And then after a few days, realizing, like, wow, I'm actually providing value here. This is a thing that could work. So, yeah, it was, I'll never forget that. That was kind of the moment that pushed me into this. And yeah, give her a lot of credit.
Yeah, so I've actually got the first dollar I ever made back here in this
Nice.
corner, right there. And so, yeah, big deal. How long did that take? Because it took me literally, I think it was like 7 or 8 months, like
Yeah.
serially, before I had my first client. And my wife, we, sleepless nights, really kind of asked me when it was all going to happen. And of course, I
Yeah.
didn't have a definitive response because you don't know. It's sales,
Right.
right? I mean, you're out there hustling.
Yeah, I mean, so mine's a little different. This is more kind of luck. I was laid off, and then I took a couple of weeks. I got some really good advice. I was just calling anybody I knew, getting connected to all kinds of people, and some of the best advice I got was like, "Hey, this is a crazy time. Like the world is shutting down.
Right.
Take a week off. Don't do any networking stuff. Just watch movies, relax. When you hang out with your kids." I did that. That was like a week, and then kind of fired back up the interview process, and then my old boss called me, and I reached out, and so it was really like 3 or 4 weeks. It was very
Nice.
fast, but it was different than you in that I didn't like create a business and then tell my wife like I'm going to go sell this thing. It was more I never even thought about it. She just called me and said, "Hey, why don't you do this?" That client called me. We had a meeting, and I remember being on the phone. I mean, I had like an interview later that day for a job, and he's like, "So do you do this as like your business?" And I'm thinking like, thinking about kind of yes. I mean, I kind of stammered through that, and so I didn't have. I was fortunate in that I didn't have that like, here's my business plan, here's my website, now let's go sell it. I did it the reverse way. Somebody reached out. I kind of fell into that. Now, so that was kind of lightning in a bottle. Very fortunate. I will say when we pivoted away from me doing all the work, new branding, new website, have this grand plan of like let's place people person. So when we did that reset, that was like a 3 months before we got our first client, and that was
Yeah.
sleepless nights. I'm like, what is this pivot make sense? Like, what have I done? Like, I was doing fine as a consultant. I made a huge mistake, and so that was stressful. But that
Yeah.
first one was just very, very random, very fortunate.
Well, I think that's a rite of passage. It's funny. I wrote down when you're talking the reluctant entrepreneur. Like I feel like
Yeah,
that may be you. You know, it's like
totally.
you're here. It happened. It kind of happened by accident, organically, and it's been a perfect
Yep.
storm of activity to get you where you are, which is great. In regards to kind of the sleepless nights and the pivot, yeah, I've done that as well. I did this recently where I raised prices, had to fire some clients,
Yeah.
and basically just make sure that the business that we took on was the business that we should be taking on. Started saying no to stuff that was maybe on, on the peripheral or not in our wheelhouse, and yeah, that's tough, and you feel vulnerable as well because you made a decision that impacts your business, your livelihood, your family, and yeah, it's pretty tough until things come to fruition. And similar to
Yeah.
you, it took me about 3-4 months, no, about 2 to 3 months after doing that,
Hmm.
where I started having some tighter target clients come to fruition, and now I'm seeing that kind of cascade into more opportunity through referrals, and again, just ensuring everything that we do is in our wheelhouse, so we provide a good service and do good work.
Yeah. I'm risk averse, so I'm not going to do anything crazy like take out huge loans for this business.
Right.
So the sleepless nights, I go back to I thought when I worked at places like Mailchimp and Full Story, I thought that was more secure. But then the COVID layoff really made me realize like it's actually no more secure.
Right.
I think this is stressful. Every month that goes by, I'm looking at my calendar over here. Like every month that goes by, I get a little more comfortable calling myself an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
When the first 6 months, I honestly thought it was just like something I would do until the pandemic was over, and then I go get a job. And then every month, I mean, you probably can relate to this. I'm sure other folks you talk to, it's like the longer you do it, you're like, wait a minute, maybe this is what I'm doing. So I think reluctant entrepreneur is a good phrase. I like that.
Yeah. No, I
It's
call it
getting a
old.
little easier, but
Yeah, I call it old man strength. I've been in business 4.5 years, and it took about, I think it was like year 3, where it's like, all right, I've got a business. And I've also,
yeah.
too, I'm so far removed from corporate America that the thought of going back, really, really irked me.
This is funny. I'm not making this up. I had a dream last night that I took a job, like a normal job, and I woke up. It was like a
You in a
nightmare.
panic?
It was like I was at the desk on the first day at like noon, freaking out. Like, what have I done? I have a boss telling me what to do again. It's weird you bring that up. I had that dream last night, and
Yeah.
so I think that was a sign that I'm on the right path because I woke up in a cold sweat.
Yeah. No, totally, totally. So it sounds like there's been a couple of times where you've thought about hanging it up, but now
Multiple.
if you
Mhm.
multiple, yeah, but now you've progressed through this kind of journey. You've validated the idea, validated that you're a good entrepreneur, or you're getting there, I guess.
I think
Um,
hopefully.
and you've seen some growth, and
Yeah.
it sounds like you're on the right track, getting a partner, rebranding, as well as pivoting. I think those are
Yeah.
all signs that kind of point to you're on the right track versus just continue to do the same thing over and over and spinning your
Yeah.
wheels.
I mean, I don't know if you can relate to this or others, but I was tempted every first client I got when I was just doing the consulting work, after like 3 or 4 months, I had 3 different clients say like, do you want to just come be our head of people? Like I had three
Yeah,
different job offers. And I think if those had come a little bit earlier, I would have jumped on one of them, but they kind of got me. I'd been in it about 6 months and I liked the autonomy and the freedom of this
yeah,
life, and things were going pretty well. But I had 3 different offers, and I took that as a sign, like, okay, we must be doing good work here. But it was
absolutely.
very, very tempting, a couple of them for sure. And so that temptation is fading more and more,
Yeah.
and then culminating with a nightmare last night about doing it. So,
No,
yeah,
totally. That's happened to me before. And my response is always, you can't afford me, and not necessarily monetarily, but it's like
right,
the amount of money it would take to have me walk away from what I've built,
right.
to then kind of report to somebody. It's a non-starter. It's not even worth the conversation.
Yeah, it's a totally different. It's a valid option for many people, and who knows? I mean,
Yeah.
I could do that again someday for sure. But
Yeah. And there's no, I'm not crapping on anybody who wants to do
yeah,
that. For me,
no,
it's personally just not an option.
yeah,
Maybe the reluctant entrepreneur, who knows?
that's your book.
A
It's an
couple more
entrepreneur.
questions, man. So let's get a little bit tactical
Yeah.
here regarding entrepreneurship. I think this is a great question. So, what do you think the number one trait of those entrepreneurs that actually find success is versus those that do not?
Number one trait that finds success versus do not. All right, this is going to be this might be a lame answer, and I'm not saying that I have this yet. I'm still working on this, but I've realized it is just discipline. Like I used to think entrepreneurship was like salesy magic, and I think of like
Hmm.
Richard Branson or just like these super charismatic people that walk in the room. But I've
Oh, it's
learned
funny
this from the
you said that. I've got
yeah, yeah. I mean, that works. He's obviously a good entrepreneur, you know. But I took this away from the entrepreneurs group that I'm in, that you're in, EOA. Like a lot of that stuff, it's none of it is rocket science. It's like we know what to do. It's just discipline, habits, just doing it.
yeah,
Because let's face it, when you're working W-2 or 9 to 5, however you want to call it, you can, if you're not feeling it for like a stretch, you can be like, you know what, I'm gonna go to work today.
I'm gonna
I'm not gonna
coast.
I'm gonna kind of coast like the rest of this week or like Fridays. And I'm not embarrassed to admit that I've done that. We all have. I like to think that I did it less than a lot of people, but I certainly had times where I coasted. And in this world, you can't do that. You have to
Yeah,
just.
you can't.
And I don't love like hustle culture, grind. I'm not saying that. It's not like you have to do
Yeah,
it 80 hours a week, but you just can't. You have to just do the things you know to do. Make the calls. Whatever it might be. So I think it's just discipline. Like it's just having a, and I'm an inherently undisciplined person, but I'm good at building systems to keep myself
right.
disciplined. So I've got good processes in place. But I don't know if that's a lame answer, but I think it's just
No,
discipline.
dude. So my response is perseverance, which
Yeah,
I
similar. Yeah,
akin to discipline. So,
yeah,
I think that's really what sets those apart is getting up every day, no matter what. And I agree with the hustle culture, although I feel like that's part of the rite of passage with being an entrepreneur. You mentioned your 80-hour weeks. I've had mine,
yeah,
and if you don't do those, then
yeah.
frankly, you may not make it.
But if you're doing that for 4 years, you're like, what are you doing? Like I'm
Yes.
not yeah, I think perseverance, grit, discipline. I mean, I think that's what it is. But my point with that is, it doesn't take a genius. Like I'm not. I mean, I'm in HR. Like it's not
You got to
just.
wake up every day. That's what it is.
Yeah, yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
really it's really a simple thing if you just kind of break it down in steps and then just do the stuff.
right.
I,
And I agree too about the coasting in corporate America, but I think that's the art in coasting is that you don't know people don't know you actually are doing it, right? And I
yeah,
feel far too many people actually do, and I've been guilty of it as well. You have a great month, kind of time to slow it down a little bit and recharge your
yeah.
batteries.
I mean, I look back at some of the work I did in corporate America in my 20s, and I'm like, I don't even know. I mean, what I was doing, like, I was just embarrassed by the effort that I was putting in and the quality of the work. I mean, not every day,
Right.
but it's just a thing that you can do more than you can do in this world.
Yeah,
And I kind of like that. I need that accountability in my life,
I did too.
so I like that. I like that about it.
Yeah, me too. And also, I found that I'm a self starter,
Mhm.
and so I feel that's a trait that's needed in entrepreneurship because after all, if you're not, I mean, you're not going to be doing anything, right? So you got to
Yeah,
have discipline, got to have the perseverance to kind of get knocked down and get back up.
yeah, and just um, to actually do stuff. So the thing that I'm most proud of is just calling folks when I got laid off and because I was in such a panic, like the world was shutting down, I had no income coming in, like I was like I got to do something, and so I just kind of was like forced into just making calls and selling myself. But how many times had I kind of toyed around with like a business, like when I was sitting in an office, I dabble with like a one-page business plan, or like I've made a couple of like business pitch decks and stuff, and made these like 20-page business proposals, all that energy and effort on a thing that I was never actually going to do. um, Whereas like you said, the self-starter part of just like, oh, maybe just like pick up the phone and call people and see if they want to use this
Yeah, I
service.
mean, we don't
um,
have the luxury of not doing that, right? I mean, I
yeah,
can't not call people, reach out to contacts, stay top of mind. I can't afford to not.
yeah, and
And that's the
I
difference.
think that's huge. And so some people I think are just like passionate and disciplined enough to just do that. While they're working somewhere, you see these. I worked at Mailchimp. We had engineers go start their own thing on the side, and they just like they crush that. And they work all day, and then they work all night on another thing. I guess maybe I wasn't disciplined enough for that. It took
Yeah,
like getting laid off, a pandemic. It took my safety net getting ripped out from under me to kind of shock me into that. So I don't take a lot of credit for being this incredible
sure,
self-starter. I
great.
was kind of shoved off a cliff into it.
it's a good reminder that nothing's safe, just because
Yeah,
you have a 9 to 5, you know.
yeah,
But just a few more questions. If you
yeah.
go back and give yourself advice, April 2020, prior to
Mhm.
starting a company, what would that be? Would that be to not start a company, to start a company? What would that look like?
I definitely would. I wouldn't do anything. I mean, I would. I am glad I started a company. I would not. I would not tell myself not to do it. I'm very glad that I did it. I I think I kind of always knew this, but I would have like emphatically told myself, like for me anyway, it was finding a business partner. Like it's a
Yeah,
lonely, lonely thing. And I
totally.
think maybe I had that inkling in the back of my mind, and that's not for everybody, I'm sure, but for me, that has unlocked a lot. We have a good working relationship. We've got a good kind of delineation of what we focus on, and that has just been a game changer for me. And it was about a year in, so I think I would have tried to do that sooner if I could give myself one piece of advice. But
I love
the
that. I've
rest,
kind of been in the same conundrum myself, where this is technically my second or third startup. And I've
yeah,
had co-founders, and this one I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it myself, but it does get lonely. Your view of the business gets very, very myopic. You kind of miss your gaps. And so I think
yeah,
it's great to have somebody, A, that you trust, be this in the same situation as you, and C, you can bounce ideas off of each other. You know,
yeah.
rising
It's
tide,
hard.
all ships, or whatever they say. I think it's important
Exactly.
to have
Yeah,
assistance.
I find myself motivated. We have our weekly meetings and we've got our to-do list, and you know, that has given me another level of accountability. Like just yesterday, I had like 5 or 6 things that I needed to knock out, and I know my business partner's looking at it, and I was excited to like share the updates. Like, hey, I did all these things. I'm
Yeah,
not sure. I wasn't really feeling it yesterday. I'm not sure I would have done those things if I didn't have a business partner. If it's just me
accountability, man.
sitting in my office, and so that's one piece of it. But that's the biggest thing for me. Like everything else, is was rite of passage stuff. Like I told you, I took on that one too many client and crashed and burned with them. But I don't think I would do that over because it was helpful. So that's probably the one piece of advice I would give myself, and that may not apply to everybody, but for me it was important.
That's great. That's great. All right, a few more questions, and then we're out of here, man. So, favorite aspect of being your own boss?
Um, I just, I mean, I think it's probably everyone would say like the freedom and autonomy. Now, freedom's a weird word. Like I've got some freedom, but I also, like you said, if I have freedom to take Friday off if I want, but
Yeah.
that's a slippery slope. So, but that is a part of it. But I think for me, I mean, as humans, we just like accomplishing stuff. I think, and so for me, my favorite part of being my own boss is I'm doing it not to get all like misty here, but I'm doing it for myself. Like
Yeah.
before uh, I was doing it for either my boss or the company, and I had some intrinsic motivation to grow in the company and do things, but I just it's it's about accomplishing something for myself and my family that's just pretty powerful. That I just love that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There's no ceiling, right? I mean, you
Right.
can, the future is kind of what you put in. And, it's really, I think one of the most attractive propositions. And you also too mentioned being able to take the freedom to being able to take time off. And I feel like that's a big misnomer as well, though, because
Oh, for
when
sure.
when I'm on vacation, I'm working. In fact, when I was at corporate America, when I was off, I was off. Like I
Yeah.
didn't bring my laptop, and now I'm traveling with an iPad at least. And I've resigned myself to the fact that when I wake up, I will have coffee, I'll be present with my family, but then I need 30 minutes to get through my stuff, to then be present for the next 3 4 hours, and then rinse and
Yeah.
repeat after lunch, and then again at 6. And it sucks, but the second that I realized that was my reality and that's what I signed up for, it's been a hell of a lot more palatable than having to work on an RFP.
Mhm.
Which, this is a true story. When my wife was in the labor room, going to give birth to our first daughter, never
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
mean, freedom's a tricky word. Like I just finished this book by Sebastian Junger called Freedom, and It's a short book, but he goes into some history of like folks on the frontier in the U.S. You have freedom to go live out in the middle of the woods and not report to the government, do whatever you wanted. You're also likely to get mauled by a bear or killed, by Native Americans. And he talks about the different, and then he goes into some of the freedom that those tribes had. And like we just throw freedom around all the time. You can have freedom very easily.
There's an opportunity cost associated with said freedom.
Yeah, and so it's a great read. I highly recommend it. But like I've found, yeah, there's freedom with this, but there's also freedom working at Mailchimp. Like you're free to walk down and get all the free food they have and get
Right.
a paycheck with nice benefits for doing C plus work. Yeah, I think the freedom's great, but that's not always as awesome as it sounds. For me, it's really that just kind of uh, fulfilling something for myself.
Right.
It's that drives me to do this. I think.
Yeah, no, makes sense. So the inverse of that question, what's the least favorite part of being your own boss?
Um, I think just well, it's probably the inverse of my answer. It's just the uncertainty. Like I am probably the least likely entrepreneur out there. I've got checklists and spreadsheets for everything. I've got like a weekly review that I do. I've got a daily log that I do. I'm very structured and organized in my life. I kind of I think that's what calms me down, putting structure on top of things that are chaotic like life, and that just doesn't always apply. I plan out my week. When I was in corporate America, I could plan out my week and it would generally flow that way. But with a family, two young kids, being an owner, you just have to kind of let it go sometimes. And so that's not my nature. But
I agree.
that's the hardest part for me.
It's funny you said that. And I'll probably get booed for this, but like I had a Calendly link,
Mhm, mhm.
the
Yep,
superstar of Atlanta startup world, and I've gotten rid of it just because the thought of somebody putting themselves on my calendar
right.
just doesn't work for me any
Well,
longer.
I use it. What I did, speaking of a system, like I was getting all these kind of calls and requests for connections. I have multiple Calendly links. One is for like clients setting up their assessment, which is I want them to do that. But I've carved out 2 hours on Thursdays, like 2 to 4, and I have a Calendly link when someone asks me to meet up or to chat. I say, hey, I'd love to. I send them that, and sometimes they write back like, hey, it looks like there's only like Thursdays. I'm like, yeah,
By
that,
design.
that's my and I mentally know like, all right, Thursday afternoons. That's when I do my little connections. That may be something exciting, maybe not. So yeah, it's a like any tool. It can be.
I like that. I literally wrote that down. I'm gonna have my VA work on that for me.
Yeah.
Two more questions. Biggest success, biggest failure.
Um, the biggest failure in this experience is certainly taking on that fifth client. It was a group that I really respected. I met them. That we had a great call. They had been talking to like four competitors, and they went with me, like that afternoon. Like we just loved you, and it was a absolute culture fit. But then like a month in, I'm like I'm doing just not great work. And that was just so disheartening. I had to call them and say, I've taken on too much. And I wrestled with that. Like, am I just being lazy? Have I taken on too much? Am I just tired? Like, but it just was disappointing. I disappointed them. And we've talked since, and but that was the biggest failure so far. I'm sure there'll be others. That just hurt. Like that, I don't know. It just sucked
Yep.
to drop the ball. Um, I think biggest success, one of the, I'm super proud of our the branding that we did. Like very early on, we went and paid money that we didn't really have for a really talented branding expert to get our website and logo and all that stuff. It can be just like window dressing, but for us, I think it really helped tell our story of what we're trying to do and how we're different. And I was just super proud of how it turned out.
Website looks
Um,
great, by the way.
Thanks. And I love the whole experience was great. Like she dug into it. She's in branding, but it was like a more of a business coach thing. She really dug in, like, why are you doing this? Like, why do you have this business?
Right.
Why would somebody go? And it was a super powerful thing that opened up a lot of doors for us. So I'm proud. I'm super proud. I don't know if that qualifies as a success. It is in my mind.
It is, man. That's a win. That's a win. You
Yeah,
got to
I
celebrate
was
them,
proud
right? I
of
mean,
it.
So I feel same about, I spend a lot of time and money on my website, my presence, and I get compliments and say, hey, I love the messaging, love the branding. And when I look at my competitors, it blows my mind as to how poorly designed their websites are.
Yeah.
And so no, I think that's totally a success, and it's a point of pride. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, thanks. If you find somebody that's good at it, they can help tell your actual story. Like, I'm not saying that it's like tricking anybody with like, oh, it's
Right.
just a shiny website. Like, I think it actually imbues and portrays what we're trying to do.
Which
So
is
I'm proud of that.
so difficult. I mean, that's
Yeah,
honestly is kind of the advice that I give myself, back to starting a company. Is branding and messaging is paramount.
yeah.
It just takes forever to figure out your what, your why, and what the hell do you do?
Yeah, I mean, I made a with Squarespace and other things these days. I made a really pretty website in a weekend before I had a business, and it looked
Yeah.
fine, and it was serviceable. And I would recommend doing that as you're starting off. But like
Come here.
eventually, if you're serious about it, that's one of I think the best places to spend some money is doing getting that right.
Yeah, agreed. I think I'm on my fourth or fifth iteration. We're about to do another one, and
Yeah,
always keep moving.
yeah,
What is the hardest part about having your own business? Last question.
yeah. Hardest part. I think for me, with a family, the hardest part is setting some boundaries and like for myself and knowing when to turn it off and when. I mean, I work in my home, and so it'd be very easy to pull out the laptop or I'm constantly taking email off my phone and then putting it back. So for me, it's just remembering like, hey, the work day does end and your family is on the other side of that door. And whereas pre-entrepreneur, pre-pandemic, the commute, hit the podcast, park the car, and like
You
work
get the
is done.
break. Yeah.
That's harder. I'm trying the old like, all right, take the dog for a walk, and that's your commute. But
Yeah.
I still struggle with it. Like I'd like to think that I'm good at it sometimes, but that for me is just turning it off. I mean,
Yeah.
you just lay in bed thinking about it all the time. So
It doesn't get better. Let me
great.
share that. But I've done the same. I've got no notifications on my phone except for text. If somebody really needs me, call me.
Yep.
But no email, just because there's not a point. I check it enough where I can get to it and see what's going on and keep a good pulse. And I
Yeah.
try to keep my phone off from 5:30 to 7:30 or 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
No work. And then if something's really pressing, then it's just kind of, again, my duty. I'll plug in at 8:30 or so,
Yeah.
and I try to stay home. And I think that's important, especially when you work from home. And that's no different from somebody that has their own firm or somebody that works for a corporation. I worked for home for 16 years,
Yeah.
and it's very hard to kind of not have the lines blurred between home and work.
It's tough.
Yeah.
I'd say the second hardest part of being an entrepreneur is getting a home refinance because they just think.
Yes. Well, I think we could do another podcast on some of the challenges and tribulations that one, that somebody gets into. Because
I,
yeah, I mean, the level of scrutiny that you get. I mean, you could be laid off five,
I thought that's what I said. I said, "Hey, my last W-2, I was laid off. Like, would that be better?" And like, yeah, technically, that's easier for us. So that's a little tongue in cheek, but like, get your any loans in order before starting
refi
this journey.
prior to jumping out of corporate America.
Yeah,
Pro tip number
pro
one.
tip. Yeah, that's
So Matt
get
Tanner,
through
how can
that.
if people want to reach you or learn more about Same Page, how can they get in touch with you?
You can Google Same Page, usually comes up, but Same Page HR is the website, and all our stuff's on there. So I don't do any Twitter, Instagram. We've got a great newsletter on there. Subscribe to that. But yeah, Same Page HR.
Awesome, man. Hey, it's been a real pleasure. Really appreciate you coming on, Matt. Thanks for the
Yeah,
time. Thanks for sharing your story. Love what you guys are doing.
it was fun. Thanks, man.
You got it.